Are you looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football and basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select two or more players, pick more or less on their projections for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what makes Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the PrizePicks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, PrizePicks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/bluewire and use code BLUEWIRE. That's code BLUEWIRE at prizepicks.com/bluewire for a first deposit match of up to $100. PrizePicks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
Hello, welcome to Pod Maverick After Dark. I apologize for the shortened sense of our intro music because I didn't actually press the go live button. But our intro music really divides our community. Some people hate it. Other people absolutely love it. I'm joined as always by my co-editor over at MavsMoneyball.com, Josh Bowe. How are you, Josh?
I'm doing good. We made it through to the other side. Training camp has started. We officially have podcasts to do where literal new basketball things are happening every day. We've made it. The off season is over for the most part.
It's
good to feel. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, and it's a good feeling in the sense of, I mean, I've talked about this a little bit. I tend to have like a sense of dread when I'm getting back into habits. It's very much like the New Year's resolution stuff. You're like, I'm going to be good. And it's for me, it's just like getting back into it, trying to do it again. I hate the thought. And then I love the actual, like the doing. The last over at Mavs Moneyball, for example, I guess it's 3 days now. I've been kind of, pounding the pavement like Jay Jonas and Jameson, get me more Mavs content. And the wonderful people over that help us write at Mavs Moneyball have answered the call. We have a couple of good ongoing series right now, some of which we'll actually talk about later. First is our player preview series, which everyone is writing on that. And then everyone's favorite, or in some cases least favorite, takesman of Mavs Moneyball, Xavier, is attempting to do a series of win total columns. And one of the things I really like about the preseason is the ability to talk about other teams. And a lot of our guys watch... I'm just gonna be honest. I don't really watch a ton of basketball outside of national TV games that aren't Mavericks. I follow the league. I check scores. I watch it, but I don't get in the weeds. There's like 3 or 4 guys on our site that watch basketball every stinking day of the season. And I would say Xavier's definitely one of those guys. And so he's had fun writing about those things. We got a lot of columns and posts coming up. Last week, I also briefly made a call for new writers. I left my tweet up for about 10 minutes and received, 15 to 25 applications. And we have a couple of new folks that joined the site. Really excited to read them more regularly and see what people, what thoughts people have about the Maverick season. We have a diverse staff, not only of just like personality types, but also like what people think about the Mavericks and basketball. So it's fun. It's fun. I'm really excited about the season for kind of the first time since the draft.
Yeah, I think so. It's going to be interesting. We've got we're going to be talking about these guys in these player previews, but again, just can't emphasize enough what the infusion of new faces does when you're on this side of the microphone or computer screen and you have to cover the team and not just watch it for fun. Like just having this much of a roster overhaul really energizes you in a lot of ways that go beyond just your interest in the game, but just trying to do this stuff. It just makes such a big difference.
Well, and last year was just such, both with the Mavericks and within what we do here, it was such just honestly a clusterfuck by March. For anybody that doesn't know or doesn't remember, our SB Nation podcast effectively closed. They shut the podcast feed down in February and gave it to us, which was pretty fantastic. They didn't have to do that because it was their intellectual property. They gave it to Josh and I. We found a new home with Blue Wire, which you see there in the bottom right. But as all that was happening, it was really difficult to coordinate and figure things out. And so it's like the design. And while the Mavericks were also a Titanic, like cruising towards an iceberg. So we're like having to deal with all this behind the scenes stuff. And like one of the things, I keep talking about this, but apparently it doesn't sink in. This is not our job. This is fun, ostensibly, in theory.
It has to be.
And it is fun.
Yeah.
But there were definitely times last year where I think this really tried you and I. You've been doing this longer than me. You've been doing this since the 2012 season. 2011.
Yeah, I joined the site summer of 2011.
And you were a sports writer going back to right after college. So like
Yep.
you've been, at the grind in one sense or another since what, 2009?
Yes.
Okay.
2007 was when
2007. Good God. And so I've been at it since 2012, 2013. It's just, this was one of the harder periods of transition, despite the fact that we have a lot to look forward to. And I'm really, really glad to be able to talk basketball, real earnest to goodness basketball again. All right, guys, we're 5 minutes into the show. And one of the things I would like, and I'm going to ask a couple of times, is if you're watching on the live stream, if you could go ahead and hit that like button, I would really appreciate it. These sorts of things help. I don't entirely understand how. I need a Gen Z person to join our staff that understands video, that can tell me what the hell any of this stuff means and why it matters to the algorithm. If you could also consider subscribing to the Dallas Mavericks, or I'm sorry, to Pod Maverick down here. It will notify you when we go live. It's down there at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on mobile, it's a little weirder to get to. You got to exit through the comments and do that sort of thing. But I would appreciate it because we will be doing regular shows. I don't know how we're going to be doing these things with preseason games, which we're going to talk about shortly, because the preseason games start at 11 a.m. On Thursday, Saturday, and then there's a 1:45 Tuesday game against Real Madrid. Before, and then they play like one home game on like the 20th. So we have some like weird coverage bumps ahead. But let's go ahead and talk about that. So the Mavericks flew over to Abu Dhabi for the NBA's Abu Dhabi games. And there's a couple of people that I know that went to the game or that are going to the games. Grant Afseth flew over there, I think, which is pretty amazing. I'm sure somebody like Windhorst or somebody is over there for ESPN, but it's going to be an interesting, they're playing basketball in basketball hungry country. Both games are against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I don't really know what the heck to expect. Do you have any thoughts on any of this?
Well, we're going to see that starting lineup with the rookies. That's probably the headline storyline. Because that's what kids said, that they were going to start training camp and they were going to start at least the first two preseason. I think that's how far he committed, was they were going to start the first two Abu Dhabi preseason games and then they would go from there. So
we need just real quick. Did you see Jason Kidd? Have you seen him?
He's lost a lot of weight.
He looks disturbingly thin. Or I don't know. You're probably right. I'm used to him like Kidd, the bulky point guard guy. And it's really something to see him like that, where I'm just like, is he okay? Because he doesn't have any hair. Is a man all right? I know he's probably doing fine. It's not, as a bigger, older guy, it's just something I was thinking about. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, it'll just be interesting to see, get to see the rookies with Luka and Kyrie and Grant Williams. And after watching the rookies in Summer League with Summer League guards, which no offense to those Summer League guards, they played as hard as they could. It's just going to be fun. Yeah, it's different. It's going to be fun to watch them against NBA competition while also playing with NBA caliber talent, which is a big deal. It's been a lot of fun to see Lively get all these reps with Luka in training camp. Like, regardless of the track record of like rookies starting on teams that want to win, it's still like nice to see because, we were both, we didn't play in college, but we both played in high school, and I think we both kind of played the same position of big garbage man. And we were not, we did not get the ball a lot. And I think we could both attest to that. Doesn't matter if it's high school or college or NBA, you are more inclined to do that garbage work when you occasionally get past a layup under the rim every now and then, because hey, it feels good to score. Like, wow, surprising breaking news about basketball. So it'll be fun to see Lively get some lobs. And I mean, I honestly think that that's going to help develop him on both sides of the floor, because I really think when you get those easy buckets on offense for a big man in his type of role, it's going to make the rest of the game not necessarily easier, but he'll be more motivated. I think he'll be more motivated emotionally and mentally to play on that other side of the floor.
So one of the fun parts about media day and watching stuff from training camp, and, you know, again, we're not there, but we watch all the videos, we consume all the content. One of the things I've been slightly amused by is Luka is he's kind of terse. You know, Luka plays basketball with like a sense of joy, which is great. But in the media, he's always been kind of quiet and almost reserved, and everything now, he's just been a little short. But I've really enjoyed his comments about Lively, where he's indicated, and again, you're reading into it. I'm reading into it. He's indicated that he's pretty excited. That gives me a lot of stuff to look forward to. We've talked about it extensively, but I'm looking forward to seeing how those two connect in a real game. Now, how many minutes they're like, again, they play the Wolves twice, and I'm pretty sure they play the Wolves 4 times during the regular season. Like, you're getting through these games, you're putting on a show overseas for fans, but you're also doing your best to not get hurt. Like, these guys are in game shape. Like, that's why they've cut down drastically over the preseason schedule for almost all sports over the last several years, because you're just giving guys more opportunity to get hurt. Now, granted, every time they play basketball, they could get hurt. That's kind of the opposite thought of that, but it's something that I'm curious to see what kind of lineups we get. I wonder if any of these backbench guys are going to be getting, because I think they carry 21 guys maybe through the preseason, and they have to start making cuts. And I'm wondering if any of these guys get a chance to actually show some much of anything. If they were here for more of the preseason, we would probably be getting more regular updates. But this is going to be one of the odder preseasons the Mavericks have had since Luka has been on the team. I'm curious as to what kind of the early season forced bonding does. You know, obviously these guys are together all the time, but they're not going home between games. Like, they're over and they're sharing a hotel. And I think that sort of thing can probably be very good for early team cohesion for guys that, like you said, we've talked about a lot of new guys. I'm curious to see how that'll work. It's going to be difficult not to overreact to the games, because let's say that Anthony Edwards and Omax match up at some point. If Omax does anything to bother Anthony Edwards, the excitement meter is just going to be off the charts. And I don't blame anybody. That's what I'm hoping for, to be honest. I don't know. I'm just trying to think what I hope to take away from these games, other than the fact that I'm going to have to put on my do not disturb at work for 2 hours in the middle.
Yeah, you made an interesting point about the end of the training camp roster guys, because that's, preseason, they usually get some chances.
Mm-hmm.
But 3 of their preseason games are like international.
They're showcases.
Like they're to put on a show, and it's like, well, you're not gonna play those guys 20 minutes in Abu Dhabi when all these people paid tickets and paid money to go watch Luka and Kyrie and stuff. Obviously, regardless, those guys aren't going to play like 30 minutes, but still, like, I think it changes the equation compared to like a normal preseason, where like at least one of the preseason games, those end of the bench guys play like basically the whole game for the most part. Maybe that'll be what the final game in Dallas would be. Maybe that'll be the game where everyone gets a chance to give one last chance to make an impression before the final cuts.
Yep.
So yeah, other than that, yeah, there's going to be overreaction because this fan base is starved for like good basketball. I mean, the sour taste in everyone's mouth is still there, I think, a little bit from how last season ended. So any chance, any positive outlook, any glimmer of hope that this team is going to show in the next 2 weeks, rightfully, people are going to want to jump on that, because, man, I mean, I can't think of a more miserable season that I've covered as a sports person than that last match. I mean, it was awful. And it wasn't just awful like watching the awful basketball. It was just awful to be part of it. Like, everyone was mean. Everyone was a little grumpy because it was just so unexpected. And when, unexpected things happen, people can react in different ways. So it wasn't fun at all for anyone involved.
Yeah.
So I think, so people are definitely going to, I don't care. Say Lively and Omax are going to make first team all rookie after you see the first 5 minutes on Thursday. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Whatever helps.
Yeah.
This last season sucked.
I will say, so today was media day for most of the league. The Mavericks had theirs on Friday. Media day for the Dallas Mavericks was boring. And boring, in my opinion, for this team is probably good. Because when we've talked about this, we've noodled with the fact that I think that Luka comes into the season with a big villain target on him. However, listening to some of the different weird, there's obviously the Drew Holiday trade, him going to the Boston Celtics, where Boston fans are extremely high on a front line that features Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis making it 82 games plus playoffs. Congratulations to them. I hope it works because it could be fun. James Harden not showing up in the Philly training camp. Joel Embiid with his kind of always constant weird comments. Nikola Jokic showing up at Denver looking like 2001 or 2002 Shaq with how heavy he looks, while also having no idea who Deion Sanders was. Really like his media day was a riot. He's just so accidentally funny. The Mavericks being boring, I think, is really good. I think it's really good because the narrative against Kyrie and Luka, there's this want within the national media. And it's okay. I get it. People don't really like on a national level. There's a lot of Kyrie. He's been in the league for a while. He's irritated a lot of people. Reporters who say they're unbiased, they're not telling the truth. The coverage and that sort of stuff on him has not always been, and it goes both ways.
And sometimes it's well earned, the coverage that he receives.
Yeah, but granted, during his time in Dallas, he seems to have been exceptionally joyful, which is something. His preseason comment about how he wished he would have been drafted here was really like I liked it from this is great, but I'm also like he said a lot of stuff at all these stops.
Yeah.
But it's like there's like an inkling, a desire to want to say Luka and Kyrie cannot work. So for them to, if they can come out quietly and get work done and just notch up, if they go 6-4 in their opening 10, something like that, and just kind of quiet doubters, I'm going to be really excited. And so this preseason is going to be exceptionally long. We still have like 3.5 weeks until NBA games start. I think it's like the 24th is the first day of the season. And so it's going to be interesting to see how long we can make it before kind of the forced narratives start to bubble up. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's interesting the way you put it there, because thinking about last season and this upcoming season, you're right. Like this season, there's going to be no rope for them. If they start slowly or poorly, people are going to be on them. National media, even in local media, are going to be on them much quicker because of what happened last season. Like think about last season. We kind of knew that season was over in March after those Hornets games. And for the most part, I don't think they got the attention until they started tanking those last 2 games. There were like 10 games in between that. And I think people were willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially locally. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, how many times did we come on a podcast after a game was over and we were like, man, and season seems over. And I was like, but hey, they're 2 games back. Like it's still,
that Sixers game was unfucking believable.
The one they won?
The 240 point where each of them had 40, and it was like an easy 40 for each of them.
Yeah. So we wanted, they had a lot of slack last season because we just couldn't imagine that it was going to happen coming off that Western Conference final season. Now, when you're coming off a season when you finish 11th, no one's going to have patience for you if you start slowly. Like they've kind of worn out that patience. So yeah, you're right. There is going to be a little bit of pressure, at least nationally, to do well because hey, when you get stars get more attention. Like we've talked about, this team's always kind of flown under the radar, even with Luka, because they just don't have any all-stars. They got an all-star, another one in Kyrie, like they got another star, and sometimes that brings more attention than you're used to. So we'll see. They'll definitely need to get off to a good start because I don't think there'll be as much grace as there were at points last season.
Well, okay, we're going to start player previews here after a break, but one more time, I'd like to ask if you could go down to, if you're watching on mobile, if you're watching on your computer, if you could like this stream, if you're watching right now live, I'd really, really appreciate it. It would help us out. If you could also consider subscribing to Pod Maverick, you're going to get notified whenever we go live during the course of the year, which will be a lot. It's kind of alarming. You're going to see my face a lot. One of the things I was joking about with Josh before it got on is one of the things I keep forgetting that we're doing these on video is that I'm just not allowed to look absolutely horrendous anymore. Like I need to get haircuts. I need to trim my beard. Otherwise I get grief, which is well deserved because it's like, who wants to be looking at, me anyway? I don't really understand it.
I've got that wolf. I got the wolf man creeping up on my chest right now. So it's about that time.
It is. All right. So we're going to throw a break here for our audio listeners, and then we will be right back and start talking about some more player previews for the next season.
We're driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. One of the things I love about Indeed is it makes hiring all in one place so easy and streamlined so I can spend more time on the rest of my business. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Just go to Indeed.com/Blue Wire right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
All right. Thanks for listening to those ads. Helps Josh and I out. This is one of the ways that he and I make a little bit of, it used to be beer money, but now it's daycare money. That sort of thing to help pay the bills. So, last week, for anybody that doesn't, that didn't listen or skip the show, we talked about the seasons of Marquise Morris, Jaden Hardy, Omax, Derek Lively, Maxi Kleba, and I think we did not talk about Luka. Maybe we save Luka till the end, even though I wrote on him. Yeah, let's save Luka till the very end. And I just need to remember that. The first guy I would kind of like to start with is a guy that we weren't necessarily sure if he was going to be here during the 2023-24 season. And when the way training camp started on, not training camp, Mavs Media Day started off, we kind of thought Tim Hardaway might not be with the Mavs this year because he showed up a little bit late to the arena. Do you have any kind of an opening salvo on the thoughts of Tim Hardaway Jr. entering this year?
I think I think the way he spent his time in Dallas, it's been a weird narrative for him. Because think about when he got here, he was the tax for the Kristaps Porzingis trade. He was part of the reason the Mavericks were able to make that trade was because they were one of the teams that were like, yeah, we'll take on Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract. And when he got here, he wasn't even part of it. Like anyone talking about the future of the Mavericks.
He was the tax.
Yeah, he was. When does his contract expire? Like that was it.
Yeah.
Then he turned himself into one of the best shooters in the NBA somehow, despite the fact that he was very inconsistent with his shooting before Dallas. He's been, I don't know the exact rankings, but he's been like 11th, 7th, 8th in the 3 healthy seasons he's played in Dallas in terms of total threes made. And at the same time, while also shooting 38% or better. And if you look at guys like make as many threes as he's made over the last 3 or 4 years above, and then you qualify that with of those who are above 38%. And it's not a long list of guys. It's like 10 guys, and he's one of them. So he's absolutely one of the best shooters in the league. But it's also, and despite that, he kind of turned it around, and now I think there's a sentiment that he's an actual useful piece of the team for sure. But then there's still that kind of nagging they've been trying to trade him for like 3 years. And it's like you've got this player who's been productive on the court, but not so much that he hasn't been able to keep his name out of trade rumors. And it's been this weird balance of like trying to appreciate what he gives the team while also realizing he's still kind of one of those anchors, might be kind of too harsh of a phrase, but like roster anchors that's been on the team for so long that we've talked about. Like they need to get past this era of Mavericks roster building and move on to the next one with Luka. And he's one of the last holdovers with himself, Maxey, and Dwight Powell. So we'll see. It's interesting. The one thing before I kick it to you is that for the first time, he seems more than aware and even a little agitated at the trade talk because he's been a pretty good soldier for the most part. And his comments during media day was like the first time I can remember him seeming like a little disgruntled at his place on the team.
Sure. I don't know how to talk about Tim Hardaway in a way that's rational. I have a bizarre love for Tim Hardaway Jr. One of my wife's friends made me a shirt in 2019. And it said, no, it's 2020. And it says Doncic Hardaway 2024, like an election shirt. Mm-hmm. And the fact that it still applies, like I can still wear it and it makes sense because he's still with the Mavericks is really fun. Tim's just such a weird player. Let's be honest. Yeah. The first 3 games of the second Clippers series, which was 2021, he shot 60% and nearly killed the Clippers by himself. Yep. Then his shot left him. And I don't mean left him for like the series. His shot left him for the next 60 plus games that he played. Because I went and looked this up. It was the first, because he hurt himself during the 21-22 season. He hurt his foot and missed the rest of the year. He shot pretty poor for him in that year. And then he started the year this last year also awful. He was awful again. And then the fact that he's managed to turn around to where you go to his basketball reference page and you don't really notice it speaks to how good of a shooter he really is. I don't have a way to contextualize this, but the way the Dallas Mavericks play basketball, the way Luka plays basketball, you have to have the guy who's willing to take the shots. So many NBA players get in their role, like the Josh Green of it all, who we're going to talk about shortly. Josh has a real problem where you can tell that he's going to pass the ball before he receives the pass. With Tim, you have the opposite thing where Tim can still be crossing half court and you know he's going to take the shot that comes to him. And there's some real positives and negatives with that. But when Tim catches fire, I want to say the stats last year, the Mavericks were almost unbeatable when Tim shot a certain percentage, and then they couldn't win a game if he shot under a certain percentage. Now, that's more of a roster building problem than a Tim Hardaway problem, but it goes to show you just kind of what they rely on him for. So until he gets traded, and I really do think he gets traded this year because I think there's some duplication on the roster, I'm going to enjoy Tim Hardaway insofar as I can. I'm going to be curious to see how Jason Kidd utilizes him. I hope Jason Kidd doesn't confuse him because him finding out that he might be coming off the bench was one of those moments where you're like,
is this going to be another Christian Wood thing?
can we talk to each other, please? It's just bad, it's things like that happen though. His defense, my favorite recurring national bit that makes no sense is Zach Lowe insisting Tim Hardaway is a good defensive player. No. But it's not for lack of effort. He's not lazy. He's bad. That's different.
Yeah, he's interesting. You talk about his turnaround post All-Star break last season. He shot 49.5% from 3 on 7.4 attempts per game in 17 games. So he had a pretty crazy turnaround. The one thing that has been noticeable since Rick has left in the 2 years with Kidd, his 2-point percentage has decreased dramatically in the 2 seasons he's been with Kidd. And you can kind of tell he's kind of gone back to some of his worst habits because Kidd, the big thing with Kidd and Carlisle was Carlisle had very specific roles and you could not do anything outside of that role. And for a player like Tim, who had some trouble reining in some of those bad habits, it worked beautifully. And with Kidd, he's definitely taking some 2-pointers that don't seem to fly. Brian just mentioned in our chat, got to make his twos, missed too many layups and mid-range shots.
Every Mavericks got to make their layups. Yeah. Like it was like there was disease on the team last year.
Yeah, and so much of that is not necessarily he's got to make them. He just has to make better decisions in which twos he's taking, because that's where he gets into trouble. So if he can find a way to kind of rein in some of, because he likes to let it fly. So sometimes that gets him into trouble, especially inside the arc. Outside the arc, whatever, he can shoot as much as he wants, because like you said, if you've got the greatest 3-point shot creator in the league in Luka, you kind of need someone that wants to take a lot of threes, which is Tim. So we'll see where he lands. But yeah, I'm with you. He's probably, if we both had to make bets, I think we'd both bet he's probably not on the roster by the trade after the trade deadline. So we'll see.
The next guy I'd like to talk about before I announce his name, there was a science fiction show in the early 2000s. It was a remake of a show. It's called Battlestar Galactica. Really, truly an outstanding television show. Just want to throw that out there. But one of the ongoing phrases in the show was, all of this has happened before. All of this will happen again. And when it comes to Dwight Powell, receiver of his third contract with the Dallas Mavericks this summer, there's really no other way to describe him as Dwight has always been here. Dwight will always be here. I don't know how, I got to go find this. Our buddy Dalton Trigg showed me this, that Dwight Powell is, I'm pretty sure it's Dwight Powell. He has the highest offensive rating of an NBA player ever. I'm going to go look, he sent it to a group chat that we're in that nearly destroyed me. And
your friend Seth Partnow is going to whack you on the nose for using offensive rating with an individual.
I know he's right. He's right. But it's just one of those things where it's just like how people feel about Dwight Powell is what a Rorschach test. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
Is a Rorschach test for how you feel, about basketball. And I totally get it. Oh yeah. Dwight Powell has the highest career offensive rating, 131.0. It doesn't mean anything, but it's like he's so frustrating as a player because the things he can do well, he's truly amazing at. Like, he's one of the best screeners, and that's a stat that most people don't care about. They're not stat, but like a skill most people don't care about. He is a tremendous roller. He knows where to be. And then after that, everything else is kind of I don't really like, what else does he excel at to you?
I think when given the opportunity, he can be a good defender in spurts, and it depends on how they use him. Like, I think he has really good quick feet, and I think he has really good hands. Unfortunately, when you're a big man, that does, you need to be able to guard the rim, and quick feet, like, that's more of a perimeter player trait you want to have. So he just gets bullied at the rim, and players shoot and score through him like he's not even there. But whenever the Mavericks trap or play a bit more aggressive pick and roll defense, he really does shine. Like, he gets his hand on balls in passing lanes. He's a very good trapper in terms of like getting out there and containing the guard in a double team. He's a very good hedge, kind of like show and recover big man. But anytime you ask him to either guard the rim or play drop, and they asked him to play drop way too much last year, where he's just hanging back in the paint, and you're just asking for dudes to him. Yes, he put a big bullseye on his chest when you do that.
And that's what was so disappointing about the scheming was they brought back a lot of the same guys, but Reggie Bullock had no tread on his tires. Dorian was really rough. And so it's like playing drop was just not fair to Dwight. That was not what he's there for. And so I'm going to be curious to see what their usage is for him this year. They have a few new centers that they can use, but whether they actually go to him, whether they go away from him, Rick Carlisle you had to physically separate Wes Matthews from Rick Carlisle. Like, that was the thing. Like, that was what happened in 2018, 2019 was you had to get Rick to stop calling post-ups for Harrison Barnes and Wesley Matthews, because it was like, dude, what are you doing, Rick? You got Luka. And there's an element of that with Powell, in my opinion, where I think he's their comfort blanket, and he just everybody you know what you're going to get. Like, he's going to get mowed down at the rim, but you're also going to get the screens and the rolls and those 8 easy points. And if Lively or anybody else can take a little bit off that plate, and you can play Powell 12 minutes a game or 7 minutes a game every now and again, instead of the numbers that he ended up in getting last season, I think that helps the team a lot. But go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. No, you keep going, because all I was going to finish with were some fun Dwight Powell stats from a season ago.
Yeah. Well, it's he wasn't part of the starting lineup. Like, he worked his way back into it because the Mavericks options last year just didn't work.
Yeah, I would say the big difference with the Wes and the Rick analogy is I don't think Kidd, like, Rick wanted Wes to do all that stuff despite having other options on the roster. I don't think Kidd wants to play Powell this much. I mean, for goodness sakes, he's the one who wanted McGee on the roster. So I don't think Kidd has an attachment for Powell, more so than the roster has forced him to keep going back to Powell. So now that they have Rashawn Holmes, Derek Lively, some bouncier wings that could maybe play some small ball 5. We'll see if he has to go back to the well. I did want to end on a couple of fun Dwight Powell stats. So last season, he shot 80% at the rim, which is pretty incredible. And I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's just dunking the ball. I'm like, guys, even the best finishers in the NBA are shooting like around 75% at the rim. So to shoot 80% at the rim is pretty remarkable. That's career high. He had a career high 73% field goal percentage last year. And then last season as a pick and roll man, he finished in basically the 94th percentile, 1.47 points per possession.
That's not a thing,
man.
That's just not a thing.
Shot 78% on roll man possessions. Like, he's one of the most efficient pick and roll big men of this era. It's pretty crazy. And hopefully they'll be able to get a guy like Lively that can replicate some of that while also giving you some more rim protection, because that's kind of the goal. So,
I love the comment. Like even in FIBA basketball, Dwight Powell is getting hit in the face. Like, it's just the ability. Nick Angstadt of Locked On Mavs pointed that out several years ago, and I just have not been able to unsee it since. It's really something else. The next two, all 3 of these guys are good. Let's talk about Dante Exum next.
Yeah.
I am really excited about his X factor potential, in the sense of, I don't think the former lottery guard / he'll probably play some small forward for Dallas just because of his size. I don't think the Mavericks are going to rely on him, but if they get anything out of Dante Exum this year, then I think he's going to be one of the factors that helps propel the Mavericks back into the playoff hunt.
No, I think I can buy that. He's still relatively young. He had a really good season overseas. I didn't realize. I thought he was in overseas longer than he was. He was on an NBA team in 2020, 2021. Granted, it was with Cleveland and he played 6 games. But yeah, I thought he was overseas for like a couple of years. But he played really well, shot well, stayed healthy. That's been his thing. It felt like when he was with Utah, it was like every time he started to turn a corner, he would get some injury that would kind of knock him out. Like, he played 82 games his rookie year, then didn't play at all his sophomore season because of knee injury, then 66 games, then 14 games, 42 games, and then he was done with Utah after that. So he just never got healthy. He seems to be healthier now. Still has the same defensive ability, potential that got him drafted 5th overall, I believe, in 2014. So yeah. The nice thing about him, he's basically like the Frank Ntilikina replacement on the roster, and he has so much more skins on the wall than Ntilikina ever had, and that's saying something, because it's not like Exum has a splendid NBA career, but I mean, I don't think it's a no contest in terms of like talent, and just a bit skins on the wall, because I don't think Ntilikina ever played as well as Exum did internationally in that season Exum had last year. So someone that's going to be like a reliable, like third guard that isn't going to play every night, but when you need maybe a shift in pace, or you're getting creamed, like a team is just blowing you up and your defense doesn't have it, you bring him in. Someone gets hurt, someone needs a rest, you give him the spot start, something like that. Like that's going to be his role, and I think that's going to be the best way to ease him back into the NBA as well. So, hopefully it works. This is kind of, Mavs consultant Dennis Lindsay, who drafted him as a GM in Utah, has his fingerprints written all over it. So we'll see how it goes.
The depth that he provides, the different depth, is what I think I'm most looking forward to, because that's just been one of my sort of criticisms of the last 2 seasons of Dallas basketball, overarching from like a team building standpoint, is there was less consideration to guys 10, 11, 12, 13. I understand you can carry guys on 2-way deals. I understand you can carry a vibes guy if you want. But when you have Luka Doncic and you have Kyrie Irving, you just have to have some depth, because they're going to miss a few games. If we get 65 games out of Luka and Kyrie both, I think we're going to be pretty darn excited. We haven't gotten that kind of depth. These guys just haven't played a lot of basketball. Now you can cite various reasons for both of them. And they have played a lot of basketball. They've not played the 70 plus game seasons that honestly are needed for some of these superstars. So it's like to have guys that can plug in holes, and you don't have to worry about whether or not the 15th guy is going to be, necessary to play. I'm looking forward to that change of pace. I think he'll probably have a few big games. If he can earn any of kids' trust, I think that'll be really helpful. But if he doesn't, I also think that's okay, because it's the right kind of gamble for me. That's how I feel.
Yeah, much in the same way. I mean,
Frank was the right kind of gamble.
Yes.
I just didn't want it for 2 years in a row.
Right. He wore out his welcome, but that's exactly you take a shot at a younger guy that kind of got lost in the weeds for whatever reason.
That's right.
So yeah. So totally with you on that one.
Okay, now we come to the 2 probably most polarizing guys. First is, let's go to Josh Green.
Favorite player?
Well, I think you might I kind of lost my mind Saturday night. I couldn't sleep, and something was sort of on my brain, and it's something I've been thinking about. I saw a post with comments from Grant Afseth at DallasBasketball.com. It was about Josh Green talking about his contract. And I just sort of decided that I was going to write on it, because I knew in my head this was the case. But, going all the way back to Devin Harris, Luka Doncic is the only Dallas Mavericks player that was drafted by the Mavericks, or that was traded for by the Mavericks on draft night, that's received a second contract. Like theoretically, you can maybe count Dwight Powell because they traded for him during his rookie year, but that doesn't really count to me. Guys that the Dallas Mavericks sought out, it has been Devin Harris and Luka Doncic, which is 15 years.
And then the funny thing is, Devin Harris never played a second with Dallas on that extension.
Nope. They traded them halfway through that season, but it's just crazy. And before that, it was Josh Howard. Before that, it was Dirk Nowitzki. The Knicks had like a truly crazy situation where they went something like 3 decades without signing a guy to a second contract, which just shows how bad they were at this.
And coincidentally, they have a pretty shitty playoff history in the last
year. But no, that's
it all adds up.
And Luke asks the question in the chat: does Josh get a bigger extension than Grant Williams? I get into I'm not a numbers guy, I'm not a cap guy, but I do think that a contract around the same of what Grant Williams just made makes sense for both sides. I don't see a path to Josh. Like, it's so odd. My friend Sam Viceni talked about how this could be Josh Green's blow up season. And I'm like, how is he going to get, where is he getting the shots to score 15 points a game? Where's it coming from? He works with this Mavericks team pretty well. He scored 9 points a game last year, 3 rebounds. He's improved every year, but he's not improved so much to where you go, oh, Josh Green. Like, our fans drastically overvalue him because that's what home fans do, and that's fine. But I think he's worth an extension. I think he's worth keeping around. The Mavericks are better with him than without him, and I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to go into restricted free agency next year and get him for 44 million, something like that. Go 4, sign him for 55, and just be done with it. That I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does this year. I think he's going to get preferential. I think he's going to get preference over Hardy in terms of playing some of these guard minutes. I think if he can continue his 3-point shooting, and if he can play point of attack defense, he's going to earn minutes. And that's good enough for me. He doesn't need to be a star. He needs to be a star in his role. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, they just need more guys that are his age. Like, that was the thing about 2020 and 2021. And even when they went to the Western Conference Finals, we saw that weakness got exposed against the Warriors. They just need more guys that aren't, at the end of their primes. And Green is one of the few guys that represents, like, still has something that can grow and develop into. Then you need guys with, like, it's just so funny. We talk about Luka, like he's still only 24. Like, you can't just keep surrounding Luka with, like, these 20, 29, 30, 31-year-old, like, role players. You need youth. So that's why, Grant Williams, the 2 rookies, the fact that Green has gotten some time to develop, that's been a really welcome sight. And again, yeah, you don't need Josh Green to be an all-star, but you need him to be, an above average starter. You don't want his ceiling to be really dynamite bench player, considering kind of how you've invested the time into him and him being a first round pick and his trajectory. So we'll see. Again, he is the hardest player. I have no idea, like, how to project, like, how he's going to play, because if you just look at his trajectory from rookie season to last season, like, if it follows that trend, he's going to average 15 points per game on, like, 80% shooting, because his shooting numbers were outrageous last season. And partly that is because he doesn't maybe shoot a lot.
I mean, he had a true, no, you're not kidding. People, not to cut you off, he had a true shooting percentage north of 90 for a not insignificant number of games. Like, he was bananas for a while.
Yeah. And I mean, there were games last season where Luke and Kyrie aren't playing, and he would go from like I'm looking at his box score. The Luke and Kyrie played in that game against Phoenix when Kevin Durant got traded. It was one of Kevin Durant's opening games with Phoenix, and it was a showdown, like the bucket for bucket, really good game. And Green played 28 minutes. He scored 0 points and took 2 shots. 2 games later, there's no Kyrie and there's no Luka, and he scores 21 points on 16 shots, 9 of 16 from the field, with 10 rebounds and 4 assists. And it's like, it's not just that he scores the points. Like, yes, when guys are out, he's going to get more opportunities. It's the way he plays without those guys. Like, he goes from, like, a bystander that doesn't touch the ball and kind of hides in the corner to, like, those games where Luka and Kyrie were out, he was like the offensive hub. Like, he's running pick and rolls, he's doing dribble handoffs, he's initiating offense from the elbow. I'm like, wait, when did he turn into Paul George? Like, I'm not even trying to be, like, hyperbolic here. Like, it's amazing, the flip of a switch when he got the ball a lot and without Kyrie and Luka to what he looked like playing, with those guys. So the goal for him this season, he has to find a way to balance how he plays without those guys with how he plays with them. Like, there has to be a happy medium between going, like, a week and scoring 10 points, and then when you finally get a bunch of touches, you look like an all, like, like, he has to find a way to be like a 10, 11, 12 point kind of contributor when Luka and Kyrie are playing. Like, and that requires him to be a little bit more assertive when those two are on the floor, not defer as much, and we'll see. And we'll see if his shot is real, and we'll see if that keeps developing as it is.
I do think the shot is real.
Yeah.
I really do. Because in the first, so he shot 16% his rookie year from 3. Like, I didn't remember that till I dipped in. I remember him not being a shooter, but not 16% bad. Then he went up to 36. Now he's up around 40. Even if he's not 40, say he's 37, say he's like league average. I'm okay.
If he's shooting more, like, if
I need him
more
to
than
shoot.
that matters.
Yeah, and I need him to attack. The as long, and he's a passable defender. Everybody that's been talking at me about how good a defender he is, like, not to be, like, crass here, but if he was a good defender, the Mavericks wouldn't have been, like, so freaking bad at defense. Like, I know it's a team game, but, like, I just, he's fine. He works. Let's not go nuts.
Yeah. He has moments. His worst thing defensively last year was he actually kind of like overhelped.
Yeah.
Like, which is kind of understandable for a guy like him and his age and his time in his NBA. Like he would rotate when he didn't need to because he's, he wants to try. Like he generally wants to be, as good as he can be. And sometimes that happens. And then of course you've talked about it a lot. Like he can get cooked in some one-on-one matchups because he's just not as big as you think he is. So, but we'll see if he can overcome that.
Speaking of not as big as you think he is.
A segue.
Our final player that we're speaking about tonight is one of the more interesting offseason acquisitions for any team, I think, is Grant Williams. Was acquired by the Dallas Mavericks as part of a 3-team trade that resulted in them sending Reggie Bullock and to San Antonio along with a pick swap in 2030, which I don't want to think about right now. Let's just hope we don't regret that. And we're talking about this when each of you and I have gray hair in 2030. I don't know what to think of Grant Williams. I'm delighted that it happened, but I don't know how to talk about him in the context of what the Mavericks are expecting from him, because I think everyone believes he's this savior defensive stopper when he is another functional, solid cog in what the Mavericks are trying to do. He's also, like I mentioned, a bizarre basketball build. He is in the PJ Tucker mold of like kind of middle linebacker-esque, where he's like 6'5" and stout as shit. Very interesting basketball player. What do you think?
I think that I hope that expectations within the community are properly aligned. He is not the dynamic potential all-star forward that I think a lot of people have wanted this roster to get over the last 3 to 4 years. Your Jeremy Grants, your Aaron Gordons, your Pascal Siakams, your OG Anunobis, like that level. He is not that guy. He's not in that tier of player. What he is he is a more youthful, athletic replacement for your Reggie Bullock or Dorian Finney-Smith role, which is to say he is a role player that will require most of his offense to be created for him. He will play some hellacious defense. He will give hellacious effort. He will not necessarily be your all defense lockdown starter, but he will contribute to winning plays on the defensive end for sure. He will be able to switch. He will be able to knock down your open threes. So again, all things the Mavericks desperately need, especially at the age that he is. And let's be honest, his contract is outrageous.
Fantastic.
Like I think that's like the most undersold thing about this whole acquisition.
Kind of theft.
Yes, his contract right now is less than the contract Dorian Finney-Smith is currently on. Obviously, Dorian's contract has less time on it, but like I think Dorian was making like 50. His total contract he's on was like 56 or 57, 55.
4 for 55.
Yeah, and Grant's at 4 for 54. Like he's getting paid less per year than Dorian, and I would say he is better than Dorian right now. So. And that's only going to aid.
He wanted to be in Dallas.
Yeah,
that's the thing.
That's one of the things you've noticed about it.
It's just an underrated element. He's a Brand Jordan guy. He liked wearing Luka's shoes. He talked about Luka all year. He knew what he was doing, and that's the first time that like the what do you want to call it? The tinfoil hat brigade was really correct about something in a long time, because that seemed to be something that was in the works or being discussed for a long time. And that just doesn't happen with the Dallas Mavericks. Just doesn't happen.
Right. I mean, he's smart. If he plays as he could play with Luka, like his next contract will not be a bargain. Like he will get paid handsomely if he does the things that he's supposed to do, playing with Luka, getting the most wide open shots he's ever gotten in his entire life. Yeah, like offensively, like he's not going to be a dynamic. I hope people don't think of him as like a dynamic guy that can attack closeouts regularly. Like he can do it, but he honestly, like that, his ability at that is closer to Dorian than I think most people want to admit, which again is fine. But I'm just trying to reel in the expectations a little bit in terms of like what kind of player
struggled with dribbling, man. I think Grant Williams has some vision and some passing in him.
He will be better. I'm not trying to say they're the same. I'm just saying they're closer than you would think off the top of your head.
My expectations are he's going to help. And beyond that, I'm interested to see how, because what I can't figure out, and we talked about this last week, we'll talk about this going forward, is Luke Burns says Grant Williams will be the voice of this team. He talks a lot and will take pressure from Luka and Kyrie as leader of this team. I'll tell you what, Luke, Ryan Russillo repeatedly talked last season about how the Celtics players thought Grant Williams talked too fucking much. But I do think there's something to what Luke is saying in the sense of the Mavericks don't have anybody that really does that. Luka's not that kind of leader. Maybe he never will be. Kyrie is definitely a little more on the soft-spoken side. He's not out there being the fiery guy. So I think there's there's something to that. What he does do, and I started to talk about this, was he gives the Mavericks have so many weird lineup options right now where their tallest player at a certain point could be their point guard in Luka. Like you could play Grant Williams as small ball 5. And he's
guarded Giannis, he's guarded Joel Embiid and done a decent job.
Like not died. And that's all you can really ask, you know?
Yeah. I think two things before we close, I want to get out before we stop. One question I'm interested in, I think I'm going to write on it later, is he was a situational player in Boston. Mm-hmm. He was never a full-time starter. I mean, there were times last season he wasn't even in the rotation, which is maybe another story. But he was always at most like a bench 18, 20 minute per game kind of guy. Last 2 seasons, he did get up to 24, 25, which if you think that's like the maxi, right? Like he had like kind of the maxi role, which is going to segue into another point I have. So the one question that he will have to answer is he is going to be day one starter, 30 plus minutes. Like he is going to be in a role that he has not had before. So yes, it's awesome that he guarded Giannis for some possessions in a playoff series. Can he withstand the rigors of playing 80 games as needing to do that all the time and not just 15, 20 minutes in a playoff?
Great point.
It's the first time he's been a full-time starter in the league. So I'm not saying that like that's going to be a bad
but it's different.
Just something to note. Like, it's an adjustment. So we'll see how that goes. And then talking about Maxey, I know I made the point that he's kind of like a Dorian or Reggie replacement. You can honestly make the case he's the Maxey replacement because he kind of I think he's going to play a similar role that Maxey does. Like, a 4 that can play some 5, that can spread the floor, that can do pick and pops, and then can switch everything and maybe not guard the rim as well as Maxey can, but can be that guy that can switch that they've asked Maxey to do so much over the last 3 years. So maybe Grant here lessens Maxey's burden, which Lord knows they've been needing to do that for like 2 or 3 years now.
A fresh Maxey.
Yeah.
A Maxey is like this is a terrible comparison, but I'm baseball's in my brain. But the problem is I don't know shit about baseball. Maxi Kleba is as Ricky Vaughn, being able to come in and just close and be crazy would be my favorite thing. This is a good question. Do we think there's any specific reason Joe Mazzulla disliked Grant? I think Grant is not necessarily the most fun colleague for 82 games for a team that has high pressure on them. The Mavericks don't necessarily have a ton of pressure on them outside of the fact that Luka exists. And down at the bottom, we have another comment. Grant has said it's more about the difference in coaching philosophy of Mazzulla versus Udoka. That's an interesting point. That really is. I mean, coaching get along is important. And Lord knows we saw that with Jason Kidd. I think if there's anything else, we're about done with our player previews. You'd asked me earlier today, is there anything else that we really ought to touch on?
I can't think of it. I wanted to show that comment real quick because like one more
good one
about Grant is like, how often have we talked about for the last 3 years, just the Mavericks don't have guys that can play in the playoffs, but they're playing anyway. Like he is one of those guys that you can at least count on to not maybe wilt under a playoff setting. He will at least bring it, and he has the ability to do things. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what else we could talk about today. We've already talked about an hour, but
Well,
the nice thing is there's going to be more happening all week.
That's exactly right. So just to talk about that, with the Mavericks playing at 11 on Thursday, I may end up taking like a half day and just covering the game because I have a lot of vacation to burn. If I do that, then I will probably host a Mavs party or group therapy, depending on the outcome of the game, after the game in the middle of the day on Thursday, like a true psychopath. Josh and I will probably record Thursday night, even if it's a shorter show, because again, it's preseason and you don't want to read too much into it, but we like talking basketball. Then we have another 11 o'clock game on Saturday, which our man Jack will be covering for Mavs Moneyball from home. Weekends are a little tougher for both Josh and I, but somehow this actually works out for me. My son has an 8 a.m. football game, 9 a.m. soccer game, and a 4 p.m. baseball game. So I will get him sufficiently tired from these first two games. We'll come home and we'll watch the Mavericks. And then depending on if you're around or not, or if someone else from the staff is around, we'll probably also record then. I probably won't do another live show, like group therapy type thing on Saturday, just because we do so many of these. And honestly, it's really easy to beat a dead horse. I saw somebody, it was Mara, who said, I just tuned in 50 minutes into the show. Please go listen on your podcast or rewatch this video when it's up shortly. I would love that. Again, for the third time and final time, I'm going to recommend please subscribing to the show and get notified whenever we go live. Remember, we do run these shows where Josh and I, or me and one of the members of Mavs Moneyball, or Josh, one of the members of Mavs Moneyball, talks about the game. We will be doing that all season long. We're not quite daily like Locked On Mavs, but we do a fair number of shows. And the second show that we do regularly are these live shows that I host where you can come up and talk with me. You've seen some of these in the off season. We used to do the Spotify green rooms, then the Spotify lives where you could talk with me. And I know there's a little bit more of a barrier for entry for video, but you don't have to show yourself if you don't want to. I always tease our listener, Leo, who's tuned in for years. He just won't turn his camera on, which is fine. And but I want to hear from you. I want to talk basketball with you. One of the things that I attempt to not do, I don't intend to ever gatekeep, because this is basketball. It is a fun sport. I want to talk basketball with my friends. So please come up on the stage and join me, or my enemies. If you don't like me, you can also come up on stage and talk to me. I don't care. We could have a good little argument and have a good time. It's like being at a sports bar. Do you have anything else before you get out of here?
I think I'm good.
Please go to Mavs Moneyball early and often, because we will be throwing up a lot of content. There will not, preferably between now and when the Mavericks exit the playoffs, there won't be a single day that goes by where there's not at least one new article. Hopefully as many as 4 or 5 in a day. You never know. That's the kind of staff that we have. We have 25, mostly volunteers. We have a great time writing and talking about basketball most of the time. This has been Kirk Henderson and Josh Bowe. Thank you for joining Pod Maverick. We will talk with you soon. Go Mavs.